A massive funeral cortege winds its way through the streets of modern Bangkok. It is the culmination of a year spent mourning the death of Thailand's most popular lady, the mother of the king. The Princess Mother was 95 when she died, and like Diana, Princess of Wales, inspired a massive outpouring of national grief. With her passing, the Thai monarchy lost one of its greatest assets, a woman with a common touch who inspired loyalty and devotion. From her personal secretary, Dinada Dikul, she inspired even greater devotion.
I will exchange my life for her because she would do much more so for the country than I personally can do. Really seriously, because I've been her secretary, private secretary for 28 years. So I will, exchange my life with her life. I mean it, literally.
Following her death in 1995, the Princess Mother lay in state in the Dusit Throne Hall as a steady line of family and close friends came to pay their respects. But they were far from alone. In the months before the final cremation ceremony, the official visiting times had to be abandoned. Hundreds of thousands of people flocked from all over Thailand, desperate for a last chance to say goodbye to the woman who had brought the monarchy closer to their own lives. This outpouring of grief seemed to mark the end of a period of unprecedented growth and stability. Almost a year later, the glittering facade of the economic miracle would begin to fade. 1996, and the Princess Mother's private secretary has been asked by the king to organize the details of the cremation ceremony. It's an opportunity for him to show his loyalty and devotion.
เป็นไงได้รูปดีไหมเขาใช้ได้เดี๋ยวพยายามเอาให้ดีทางนี้ใช้ได้หมดแล้วนะ It's not me alone, you see. What we're talking about, talking about the whole nation. Everybody, the whole nation, 60 million, would, if give them a chance, they will come right here. 60 million and help us to work for her, especially for Her Royal Highness the Princess Mother. Everybody would like to have a hand. If you ask anybody here or outside, standing outside by the roadside, would you like to come and help to touch up or to clean and so on? They said, give me the chance, give us the chance, we will do it. So it's not me, I'm talking for the whole nation. For me personally, I would say I would give more than my all, personally.
The Fine Arts Department have been working round the clock for months to prepare the site where the final ceremony will take place. Within the walls of the Grand Palace, the monarchy has always been bound up with ceremony and ritual. For over 800 years it has dazzled its people, bewitched them with its pageantry, and provided them with an endless stream of speculation, intrigue and rumour, none of which is ever talked about in public. Although the monarchy's power hasn't been absolute since the early part of the century, it still retains the trappings and protocols of a medieval court. But unlike its European counterparts, the Thai system still retains the law of lèse-majesté, which can mean up to 15 years in jail for anyone who dares to criticize them.
Defaming the king is like defaming God in the Middle Ages. All the Thai press don't dare to mention anything negatively on the king. For instance, the king gave a speech for 3 hours. Sometimes, in my opinion, it doesn't make sense. They all praise the king. It's wonderful.
What Sulak Sivaraksa says may seem harmless, but in Thailand people are stunned by what they see as his blunt nature. He is never far from controversy, and as Thailand's most outspoken critic, has been jailed for his views.
Well, I'm the only one who is known to criticize the king openly. The law of lèse majesté is not to help the king. It helps the dictators. It helps the politicians, particularly the right-wing politicians. That's why I want it to be abolished, because the Republicans never open their mouth. See, those who open their mouths are those who want to preserve the monarchy. And I think if you want people to preserve the monarchy, you must allow them to criticize the monarchy openly.
Within the sanctuary of their palaces, the royal family is surrounded by a tight-knit elite, loyal courtiers vying for positions of influence. The result is a monarchy removed from the real world, their public face replaced by those of the royal courtiers. Yet the princess mother came from another world, far away from the rigid confines of the royal household. The area of Bangkok where she grew up has hardly changed at all. She was born into a poor family, commoners from the wrong side of the river. Her parents were local goldsmiths, and they called their daughter Sangwan. No one ever expected her to become a member of the royal family, which is the very reason for her popularity. Shortly before her death, the king built a museum of her life and a sanitized reconstruction of her childhood home. Years later, her daughter, now a princess, wrote a book of her life called What My Mother Told Me. It is one of a very few books that tells us anything about her private life.
บ้านนี้เป็นบ้านเดี่ยวชั้นเดียวแล้วก็มีห้องรับแขกเพียงห้องเดียวเราต้องใช้ห้องนี้สำหรับทำอาหารด้วยเพราะบ้านนี้ไม่มีห้องครัวแยกออกไปอีกต่างหากก่อนที่จะถึงประตูทางออกจากบ้านจะมีหิ้งพระพุทธรูปองค์เล็กๆที่ครอบครัวของเราจะใช้เป็นที่บูชาและสวดมนต์ทุกเช้าและทุกเย็นบ้านนี้ไม่มีห้องน้ำอยู่ในบ้านแต่มีตุ่มน้ำใหญ่ๆ2 ตุ่มตั้งไว้ข้างนอกบ้านเอาไว้ใช้อาบน้ำหรือบางทีเราก็จะเดินไปอาบน้ำกันที่คลองหรือแม่น้ำใกล้ๆบ้าน
By never forgetting her roots, she became the favorite of the Thai people. The way of life she described is a familiar story to the millions of Thais who still live this way. To think this little girl would grow up to be the mother of 2 kings seems an unlikely story.
The princess mother is a very unique phenomenon. I knew her. She was kind to me. She was very good to my sister, and so on. She was good to everyone. She's very humble, very approachable. She ate simply, dressed simply, and she would rather collect money. She collect flowers, made to cart, and she sold to the rich a big amount of money, and she would spend them on to the poor. She was wonderful with the poor. She was the first commoner, won scholarship to study nursing in America, and the prince who gave her the scholarship fell in love with her and married her. First time in the royal family that a celestial prince married a commoner with no roots whatsoever. She came from the lowest of the low.
Sangwan fell in love with and married Prince Mahidol, a member of the royal family far from the line of succession to the throne. The marriage was allowed as no one ever imagined what the future would bring. They spent the next decade living in America, where Prince Mahidol was training to be a doctor. They had a daughter and 2 sons. The prince received his final medical degree from Harvard in 1928, and the family returned home. Refused permission by the royal court to practice as a doctor in Bangkok, he left for the far north to work in an American hospital. The mosquito-infested region took its toll, and he died, leaving Sangwan widowed and bringing up her young family alone. Her husband's funeral was a small affair with little pomp and ceremony, very unlike his wife's, whose life would take a different course and end with the highest honor conferred by the grandest ceremony seen for decades. With 2 weeks to go before the cremation ceremony, the focus is the Pra Meru, a funeral pyre based on an ancient design that has cost millions to build. It is a physical representation of the Buddhist heaven.
Well, we're in the middle of the Buddhist cosmology. This is our universe, with the various ranges of mountains outside and the oceans. And in the middle of all this is the crematorium, which is the Meru mountain, in the middle of the heaven.
At a distance, the building looks like the real thing. In fact, it is a temporary structure built of paper and wood. The raw materials have been gathered from around the world, and the effect is extraordinary.
What you would think is glass is actually various colored pieces of paper brought from China. But for this cremation, we have bought the last 36,000 sheets or so of gold paper, because in China they have stopped making this type of paper, and there's no place on earth that makes this.
Despite the months of painstaking work, in a few weeks' time the entire structure will be moved to a museum.
The pavilion, the crematorium, is a temporary structure because it would be inauspicious if we built something permanent. So it would be inauspicious because then it would mean that we would be waiting for somebody else from the royal family to die.
Kunying Putri, the king's media secretary, deftly handles the world's press. They have been allowed a sneak preview of the building. The cremation ceremony has become a massive PR exercise in an effort to draw a veil over why the ceremony is so grand for a woman renowned for leading such a simple life. The first part of this elaborate ceremony began almost a year earlier in a poor district not so very far away from where the Princess Mother was born. The first man outside royal circles to hear of her death was Chang Sai Lui, known as the funeral king of Bangkok. He was called late at night and asked to build a suitable coffin that would hold her remains for the year ahead.
ครับก็คงเป็นไปอย่างนั้นตลอดจนการดีไซน์แบบนี้เราก็ค่อนข้างจะลำบากใจอยู่บ้างเพราะว่าจะต้องคืนนั้นทั้งคืนต้องเขียนแบบนะฮะว่าเป็นงานสำคัญมากเลยเพราะว่าเป็นศพสมเด็จย่านะฮะเป็นที่รักใคร่ของประชาชนชาวไทยเราเพราะนั้นผมเองต้องนั่งดีไซน์แบบค่อนข้างเราก็จะหนักไปทางไทยแล้วก็ประยุกต์ผสมทางตะวันตกบ้างก็สวยงามดีฮะจัดออกมาตลอดจนการซีลภายในเราก็ได้จัดอุปกรณ์เกี่ยวกับผ้าตาดทองนะภายในเราซีลเป็นชุดพิเศษถึง5ชั้นเลยโดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งผู้พันก็คือไม้นะฮะไม้สักเนี่ยเราใช้ไม้สักทองอย่างดีก็โดยบังเอิญทางบริษัทเราก็มีเก็บไว้ชุดนี้ไว้นานแล้วก็ไม่คิดว่าจะได้มาใช้
When Chang Sai Lui's family first came to Bangkok over 60 years ago, the country was a very different place, but change was in the air. It was a period of modernization for Thailand, as the sons and daughters of the country's elite went to the West for their education. They came back painfully aware that the absolute kingship of King Prajadipok was incompatible with the demands of a changing world. This feeling was sweeping across the rest of Asia, and when the worldwide depression dashed the hopes of the middle class, the situation quickly turned ugly. The result was revolution. In 1932, a handful of generals and civilians seized power and forced King Prajadipok to change from an absolute to a constitutional monarch in line with royalty the world over. Shortly after the coup, King Prajadipok abdicated, unable to accept his lack of power as a constitutional monarch. The line of succession fell open. Desperate to legitimize themselves in the eyes of the people, the new rulers looked around for someone that would suit their needs. The spotlight fell on Princess Sangwan Mahidol. Her eldest boy, Ananda, was just 10 years old. He had no following, was underage, and knew little of the ways of the court. He could easily be manipulated. The boy was too young to accede to the throne immediately, so the government appointed his mother as regent. Having been born a commoner, she was a useful asset to a government that wished to use the institution to their own ends. Her life would never be the same again. The next 10 years were spent with her children in Switzerland, avoiding the ravages of the Second World War. They returned for the Coronation of Ananda in 1946. Tragically, the young king died in a mysterious shooting accident at the royal palace only a few months later. Her surviving son, Bhumibol, immediately acceded to the throne. The coronation of the new king was as spectacular as it was hollow. Whilst the people enjoyed the spectacle and felt a new era had begun, the king was a virtual prisoner within his own palace and brought out only for ceremonies to help aggrandize the military rulers.
Well, when the king was crowned with great ceremony, and we thought it was wonderful. On the one hand, we went back to the good old days. On the other hand, we were going to move forward, and the country going to be great with this young king and young queen. I was young at the time. That was my vision. But later on, I realized, not much later on though, I realized that the military made use of the monarchy for their own purpose. And we realized that they controlled the king behind the scene. They would only allow him to go to the seaside resort 2 or 3 weeks in a year. They would not let him go anywhere within the country, and they control all his budget very, very tightly. The military made the coronation to legitimize them, obviously. That's why it was a so grand occasion. But behind the public, they control the king under their thumbs.
The restrictions placed upon the royal family made life very difficult. In many ways, it drew them closer together. The day the Princess Mother died, the king lost his greatest ally.
The king felt, that he owed everything to his mother. I think he felt that his mother protected him tremendously, and perhaps he was his closest friend. The king, in fact, had no friend. Very lonely person. So he felt very much attached to her. With losing her, he felt that he lost half of him. So that's why he did so much.
Ancient royal tradition dictates that following the death of very senior members of the royal family, their bodies should be placed in a highly decorated golden urn, which stands on a gilded catafalque in the throne hall, so mourners have a chance to pay their respects.
She was lying in state. She was not even put in the urn, that glittering urn was fake. She was lying behind, befitting a commoner. And he would go there to the Dusit Palace, where the state ceremony is taking place. He would go there every night, rubbing the coffin himself and so on. A very devoted son.
As well as the king, her loyal secretary Dinada would also visit the coffin every day.
I went to see the body in state for 235 days to talk to her and to comfort myself, really, to comfort myself that she's still here. I never miss a day. And each time I go there, I would go on the floor and I will talk to her, to the body in corpse, as though she's living. So I try to, telling her what I'm doing and what's going on and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to make believe that she's still here. And gradually I fade away, within a year. Still, at the moment, I'm still wearing black tie here and black dress. Why? Because I'm still mourning for her. And I shall mourn, and I will mourn for her for 1 year.
Nice tiyang sabang sapatane supati bidang
Buddhism is Thailand's principal religion. A long period of mourning is traditional, and many ancient religious rites are performed by members of the family. Monks from the Temple of the Dawn, near the Grand Palace, would come twice a day to chant prayers in merit-making ceremonies to ensure that the Princess Mother's spirit would ascend into heaven. The abbot of the Temple of the Dawn has been asked by the royal family to supervise the prayers and merit-making ceremonies.
ถ้าท่านดีจะไปทั้งเผาแล้วเสร็จนี้ก็บ่ายพระพิเศษอีกมีพระพิเศษเรียกพระบางสกุลแล้วสดับปกรณ์อีกเท่าอายุเช่นสมเด็จย่านี่90ก็91 95องค์ขึ้นอีกงวดหนึ่งถึงเย็นก็เลิกกัน7 วัน50 วันจนกระทั่งเผาพระพลาเพลิงแล้วพระเพลิงก็สร้างเมรุขึ้นเมรุมาตรเคลื่อนกระบวนไปตั้งแล้วพระก็เทศน์อีกก็กลับก็เสร็จ
For a whole year, the country has been reflecting on the life of the Princess Mother and the changes she witnessed. Shortly after her son had become king, the restrictions around the monarchy were dramatically lifted. In 1957, another coup brought the institution back to center stage. The new dictator, Field Marshal Sarit Tanarat, ironically declared, "This country works better and prospers under an authority, not a tyrannical authority, but a unifying authority around which all elements of the nation can rally." The monarchy was encouraged to adopt a much more active role in society. King Bhumibol frequently appeared in public. He personally awarded all university degrees and regularly toured the provinces. Skillful manipulation of the media ensured the monarchy's position back at the heart of the Thai way of life. Meanwhile, the Princess Mother had been working quietly behind the scenes from her palace, a calm oasis in the center of Bangkok. She was determined to help her son, and together they reinvented the monarchy as they took advantage of the new role offered by Thailand's military rulers. Building on her husband's reputation, still remembered as the father of modern medicine in Thailand, the Princess Mother, who had trained as a nurse, became concerned at the lack of medical care in the provinces.
She would travel around Thailand to remote areas, and during that time she visited elderly people and find the most remote area that the poor people and hard to get to. Usually we do go by helicopter because otherwise we'll take days and days to go in there. If you walk, it might take you about 10 days to get to the place. 10 days in and 10 days out. So we have to go by helicopter to meet these people and give them the chance of bringing doctors, nurses, dentists to come and to help them in their health. Because these people never seen doctors or dentists before in their lives.
One of her lasting achievements was Thailand's volunteer flying doctor units, which she founded as an airborne medical service that was able to extend care even to the most remote villages. As she always arrived by helicopter, the local people began to call her the Mother from the Sky. These distant provinces were peopled by hill tribes who often occupied strategically sensitive border areas. In the era of the Vietnam War and communist threat, any program that reached out to the hearts and minds of this part of the population made good political sense, and her efforts were encouraged by the army. It was this genuine devotion, lasting well into her final years, that helped to secure her the affections of the Thai people. Back in Bangkok, final preparations for the ceremony, in 10 days' time, are gathering pace. A massive golden funeral chariot, which will soon bear the Princess Mother's body, is being taken out and cleaned for the first time since 1987. It is being hauled out by the same army unit who will pull it on the day. In the last century, the whole thing used to have to be carried. The wheels were added many years later. Over 200 years old, the chariot is 11 meters high, 15 meters long, and weighs 40 tons. One of the Princess Mother's great loves was gardening. Some of her favorite flowers are those that she saw during her time in Europe. Dinada has the difficult task of making sure that the ones being trucked in to decorate the cremation grounds survive. He's also worried about the weather, which is becoming increasingly unsettled.
ตอนนี้เรื่องทางด้านในดินฟ้าอากาศเช็คทุก3ชั่วโมงแล้วตกลงว่าไม่มีปัญหาแน่นอนถ้าไม่มีปัญหาแน่นอนนี่เราจะเปิดเลยไหมวันนี้อันนี้เหลืองๆนี่ยังไม่ออกมาเต็มที่เนี่ยจะทำยังไงให้มัน step up ยังไงมันออกเต็มที่ได้ It's very difficult. These flowers are, you know, I mean, it's not tropical flower. Therefore, it's very fragile. So they have to do it with care, great care. แต่บางกอไม่มีนะฮะบางกอไม่มีไหมที่จะแซมได้มีครับมีฮะครับสามารถทำได้ไหมคืนนี้ได้แซมได้ไหมคืนนี้ถ้าแซมได้แซมซะเลยนะถึงบอกที่จดซะไอตัวที่แซมเนี่ยอันนี้ข้างหน้านะอย่าลืมนะสำคัญมากเลยเพราะว่าทางเสด็จพระเงินขึ้นทางด้านนี้เนี่ยนะ
ไอ้จำนวนที่เรามาพรุ่งนี้พื้นที่ตรงนั้นน้อยกว่าแต่ว่าไอ้จำนวนดอกไม้มันมีมากกว่า
โอเคบางคนจะแน่นกว่าเยอะเลยโอเคดีแล้วผู้วิชาจะมาดูอีกทีก่อนที่จะเปิดหมดนะโอเคขอบคุณมากสวัสดีทุกคนจ้ะขอบคุณมากครับพี่ไปเดี๋ยวคุณหญิงจะมานะเดี๋ยวคุณหญิงจะมากับคุณหญิงบรรณานะช่วยดูแลให้
As the air begins to thicken and the wind picks up, an unseasonable storm cloud gathers over the city. The delicate structure, paint and papers of the Pra-Meru are open to the elements. Dinada's worst nightmare is about to begin. The delicate flowers are taking a pounding. The tropical downpours and stifling heat of Bangkok are a far cry from the temperate climes of the Princess Mother's own gardens in the north. Late in life, during her 80s, the Princess Mother, fed up with life in Bangkok and with deteriorating health, decided to move north to enjoy the cooler mountain air. She built a Swiss-style chalet and in the grounds laid out a beautiful European garden full of chrysanthemums, geraniums and hollyhocks, an exotic sight for the local people more used to fields of opium poppies. The region she moved to was in the far north, a remote and lawless area called Doi Tung, just in sight of the Burmese border.
This is the heart of the Golden Triangle. And not only the Western people are afraid to come here. The Thai people themselves, even some of the government officials, dare not come up here. But Her Royal Highness came here. Once upon a time, before we came, they grow a lot of opium right on these hills. Nearly all of them grow opium and then made into heroines, and even the factory in refining from the opium into heroin. They are somewhere around here. You can see both sides, the flowers, opium flowers, in a beautiful colors, intercrop with other vegetable.
The local tribespeople, the Aka, supplemented their incomes by growing poppies from which they could make opium to sell to the drug barons across the border. A legacy of the opium trade introduced by the British in the last century. The Thai government had sanctioned the growth of the poppy until 1959, when concerns over addiction became acute, but the problem still persists today. In an effort to change the habit of generations, the Princess Mother, helped by the army, introduced crop substitution programs to replace the poppy. The whole area had become barren and the fertile soil was fast eroding. She concentrated her efforts by initiating projects to try and replace the millions of trees that had been cut down by the logging companies.
When we first came here, these lands are brown, and in the summer it's yellow or red. No trees, practically. All these hills are denuded. It's all slash and burn.
One of the most successful crop substitutions was coffee, which the Aka now sell in the markets of the big cities in the south. Her projects are not without their critics. The opium replacement programs have only highlighted the use of heroin, increasing the incidence of AIDS, something the Thai people are only slowly being made aware of. Back in Bangkok, and after 6 hours of torrential rain, the storm clouds are finally passing. At the cremation site, a worried Dinada begins his final rounds to check the damage.
This time of year, usually we don't have rain, so a lot of stuff here has been spoiled. I would say about 20%. But as you well see, you can get it back to normal. I hope for the best for the next 2 days here. I hope it's going to be, nothing's going to bother us. It's a finish, it's the last touch-up now. And it really has to do it the whole night tonight, so that tomorrow will be perfect or close to perfect.
He's in a hurry to finish his inspection, as he is due at the final ceremony in the Dusit Throne Hall to mark the Princess Mother's last night of lying in state.
I think by midnight tonight we should be able to complete the whole thing by midnight. And tomorrow morning we touch up, cleaning, and touch up a little bit. But at the moment I think I have to go because it's close to 6 o'clock now. And His Majesty the King and the Queen is coming to the funeral at the palace, in the Grand Palace, where her body is lying. So this is tonight is going to be the last ceremony in the palace. You see, so we should attend.
The final ceremony takes place in private, like so much else behind the palace walls. It is the last chance for all her family to say goodbye to a mother and a grandmother who with her common touch brought the monarchy into the modern age and helped place them back into the hearts of the people. As night falls across the rest of the city, workers hurry home as the centre of Bangkok will be closed off for the next 24 hours. The bars and massage parlours have been shut down as a mark of respect. For the rest of the night, courtiers will prepare the Princess Mother's body for her last public ceremony. Since well before dawn, people have been lining the mile-long route in the hope of getting a final glimpse of the urn carrying the Princess Mother's body. Thousands of mourners from across the country have flooded the city over the last few days. Outside the walls of the Grand Palace, courtiers, pallbearers, soldiers and police prepare for the long day ahead. The temperature is already in the 80s and the humidity is building, but the weather reports have predicted a perfect day. At 7:30 in the morning, the ceremony begins. The urn is carried on the golden chariot to the funeral pyre in the grounds outside the throne hall. The route is short, but the procession will take several hours to arrive. 216 men are needed to pull the chariot, which weighs 40 tons. It is the symbol of the king, its height a metaphor for his divine status. There are over 4,000 people involved in the procession, from chariot pullers, standard bearers, attendants to the royal remains, commanders of the royal weapons, and representatives from every regiment of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The military is never far from the monarchy, even in death. All the institutions are represented, especially the nurses with whom she started her life. The ceremony is an extraordinary display for a woman born as a commoner, the ultimate expression of a nation's respect, but perhaps not its grief. This whole ceremony is a reinforcement of the monarch's status and of the country's newfound wealth. It seems at odds for a woman who tried to break down the ritual barriers that surround her and her son.
The present king, when he first came back from Switzerland, had no time for ceremony and all that. But later on, he became so bound up with ceremony that unfortunately the ceremony became his master. But now ceremony has become out of gear. I think we have to change, and we have not been able to change drastically yet.
40 years ago, the military rulers forced the monarchy back into a more medieval role, something the Princess Mother must have found hard to take. Ancient practices like prostration stressed the superiority of the monarch.
In the 50s, the prostration came back because the military did away with democracy. And they claimed that democracy was leading towards socialism and republicanism. Hence, to be loyal to the king, to make the country safe from communism, we must reintroduce prostration. and crawling, which showing that we are loyal to the king.
The ceremony seemed to distract from the people's genuine grief, a rigid, doleful pageant for a woman who had led such a simple life. For the thousands of people lining the streets, the Princess Mother represented a bridge between them and the arcane traditions of their monarchy.
She really earned her respect from the people. She's very simple, very, very simple, very humble, and pragmatic, and also frugal.
I think he would have loved to have a simple funeral, and because her lifestyle was so simple, the royal cremation ceremony for the Princess Mother was tremendous, big, great, grand. But I feel that perhaps that was to satisfy the king's grief, the king's gratitude to his mother. But for me, if I may say so, if it could be done in more simple ceremony with dignity and to preserve her memory in something much more permanent, for instance, doing something for the aged, for the poor, for orphans, I think that would be, for me, much more effective than these grand ceremonies. It was far too big, far too much. Not only that, either him or the government wanted the funeral to take place at every province. We never had that in our tradition, and it's for me it's not mindful, not skillful. No, but nobody's there to open their mouth to criticize.
The Royal Guard had been standing to attention for 7 hours. Their uniforms, designed along the same lines as 19th century Prussian soldiers, are not the most practical clothes for the searing tropical heat. As the hours wear on, the dehydration takes its toll. But the fainting soldiers and the glittering pavilions are minor distractions from the real essence of the ceremony. The king arrives, and the mourners are reminded that this is a man who has lost his mother. A solemn silence hangs in the air. The Princess Mother died in hospital on the 18th of July, 1995. A fall which broke her hip left her greatly weakened, and she told him that she was tired of her condition and would be leaving him soon. She passed away while he held her hand by the bedside. After a year of visiting his mother as she lay in state, the king has come to say his last public farewell. He is followed by a long line of family members, distant relatives, ambassadors, generals and politicians, the cream of Thailand's elite. For the next 4 hours, many hundreds file past the golden urn, including Dinada, whose duties are drawing to an end.
I felt very, very bad that day. Very bad. It's like choked. I was choked. While I was walking down, I can't hardly be able to breathe. That's how I felt, you know, and I'm so sorry that this is the last time I will be with her, so to speak. That's how I felt at that time. I felt I lost one of the greatest loss I ever had in my life. That loss I felt that day. I tell you very frankly, I cried because I know that we are no longer together.
As night falls, an end is in sight to the queue of dignitaries that have been paying their respects. The guests, who have spent the day reflecting on her life, may also be reflecting on the future now that she is gone. These were certainly Sulak's thoughts as he watched the event at home on television.
I hope there will be the future of Thai monarchy, because I think we need stability. And when you look at our neighbor without the monarchy, you see Suharto, is the monarch without the monarchy in Indonesia. It's very, very dreadful. Look at Nevin of Burma, very dreadful. Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, and so on. So I feel that at least something we have for 800 or 900 years should last. But everything which is old should last, but the old must also be renewed all the time. This is a Buddhist concept. So obviously it must move along with the time.
After 15 hours, at 10 o'clock, the fire was lit. The 235 days of mourning, the 4-day funeral, and the life of the Pra Meru were coming to an end. Her soul would now ascend from the funeral pyre to Mount Meru itself, home of the gods. With her passing, the future seemed bleak. Almost a year later, in 1997, Thailand was plunged into economic chaos from which neither she nor the king could save it. It became apparent that the future for the monarchy and the enormous ritual ceremonies that represented the golden years would have to change if the institution was to survive.